Welcome everyone who's joining to this special day. I'm sharing a slide here in celebration of Rare Chromosome Disorder and Chromosome and Gene Disorder Awareness Day. If you haven't been to our website, please go. One of the team will put the link in the chat and you'll be able to see our report, which is details the experiences of you guys who took our survey last year, and also our little red book, which celebrates all the stories of our members and is a reimagining of the first red book that we had at the very start of Unique 40 years ago. The other thing we're doing to celebrate Rare Chromosome Disorder Awareness Day is, of course, having this amazing webinar with our lovely guests, Shaun Pye and James Coney. And I'm going to hand over to them now without further ado, and they can get this webinar started. So, James, over to you.
Thanks, Sarah. It's lovely to be here and be given the chance to be able to talk to Shaun, who's here as well. I'll just introduce myself briefly. I'm an editor at the Sunday Times newspaper. I've been a journalist for my whole working career. And in my normal day job, I look at investigations and campaigns and things like that. But I've suddenly found myself back in the middle of writing. The reason I'm here is because I found myself back in the middle of being a writer again when we had our son Charlie, who's 12 years old now, was discovered to have a rare genetic condition. And I ended up writing about that and the kind of journey that we've been on in the Sunday Times a few months ago. And as part of that, I got to meet Shaun, who's here as well. And Shaun I'm looking at the Radio Times here, Shaun, for your proper title. It says English actor, comedian, and writer. Let me know if you've forgotten anything else. But most people here will probably know Shaun from writing the brilliant TV series There She Goes, which was kind of loosely based on, quite fundamentally based on his experience of raising his daughter. Do you want to just explain a little bit about that, Shaun?
Yeah, so hello everyone, very pleased to meet you. And yes, 19 years ago, Joey was born, my daughter, and she obviously had a chromosomal condition which was diagnosed when she was 13. My day job is I was a TV writer, and it occurred to me when she was 8 or 9 years old that it would be quite an interesting thing to write about. So me and my wife, Joe's mum, Sarah, started writing this program called There She Goes, and the BBC got interested, and it went from there. And it mainly came about because of what I do for a living, but as the show went on, I was just so struck by how little our children or siblings or whatever connection we have are featured in mainstream culture. There's a huge amount of awareness about various forms of neurodiversity, of course, but our kids, or my child, just didn't ever seem to get mentioned, which is essentially the reason we made the show to begin with and carried on with it. And then a few months ago, I read a piece in the Sunday Times by James, and my jaw hit the floor because his experiences and my experience, all of our experiences are unique. Obviously, that's the name of the brilliant charity, but my jaw hit the floor. It was just like James was describing my life back to me. So
It's funny because I had the same kind of reverse experience. I think that's what you find, isn't it? When you have we'll move on to this a bit later on. I think we'll talk about it because it's that exciting journey of kind of having this bond once you get a kind of diagnosis. But my wife, Sarah, who's also Sarah, another thing in common, she had watched your show. I mean, she had seen it. For some reason, I had missed it for my sins. I have made up for it now, I promise. And she had been saying to me, "Oh my God, this amazing program. It's really funny, but also kind of like, oh my God, jaw dropping because it shows so many things that are in the show are like things that we've gone through at home." And then after I wrote the piece about Charlie, which was so encouraging that it was one of the best read things we've had in the Sunday Times all year. It was such a personal experience for me, but it was so wonderful to know that people who weren't connected to this world of disability or learning or even would just read about the experiences of people and really engage with it. But after I watched it, everyone said to me, so many readers said to me, oh, you've got to go and watch this. She goes, and then I sat down and watched it. I was like, oh my God, it's so. It was. I mean, I said this to you when we first met, Sean,
Yeah.
that I know so many people that love the show who don't have children with a rare genetic condition, who watched it and laughed out loud and found it cringeworthy in places, and and all of the kind of responses. But I found it really kind of awkward in places because some of the behaviors that people were laughing at in the show, I was kind of, I was like, oh my God, I did that. What a terrible one. I mean, there's an episode where you go to the park, where they go to the park with Rosie, the character, and it's such a, they force themselves out to go to the park. And we had exactly the same. I can think of a million places where we're like, I'm damned if we're not going to do this.
Yeah, no, no. Well, we just wanted to write it really as truthfully as possible, and we just sort of. Cause I wrote it with Sarah, my Sarah, and yeah, the sort of rule was just that it had to be true, and various characters in the periphery. We sort of amalgamated people, but the central character of Rosie is Joey, basically, and in a way, she wrote the program because it is just a reflection of what it's like with her, and we wanted to put in. She is funny. She does. Everyone. I assume or hope everyone watching this will agree that our children or siblings are wonderful human beings that bring so much joy and so much laughter. She's funny. She makes me laugh all the time. Sometimes on purpose, most of the time maybe not, but she's just this incredible character that you don't see reflected in mainstream culture. But the flip side of that is we weren't going to sugarcoat it and say, oh, it's all, it's such a hoot, because it obviously isn't. Sometimes it's terrible.
So,
And we
is
wanted
it?
to
I wonder if it's worth just explaining to everyone about your kind of. I don't want to say. I'm going to say journey because it's a terrible word, but the kind of what you went through, and everything about Joey's
right, okay.
diagnosis, and it starts, doesn't it, with, I mean, I think it all starts with having a child come into the world. I remember talking about the fact that we had a son. Charlie has an older brother. Everything was fine with him. I fretted massively about having, when he was born, I worried constantly that he was going to be okay and normal, and it was such a relief. And then we had, my wife actually had a miscarriage before we then had Charlie, and we didn't worry about that so much. And then suddenly he arrives, and everything's not normal from the start. And that's kind of the start of what happens to you, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the similarities of what you just said, I was thinking about what I was going to say before I came in, and I was thinking about when I found out and how I reacted. And I, as a first-time dad with my son, Frank, Joey has an elder brother, Frank, I was the same. I was absolutely paranoid about, is he going to be all right? All the tests that you have beforehand, the whole thing about the test for Down syndrome, for example, and we agonized it and worried about it, and Frank turned out the way Frank is. And then with Joey, honestly, didn't give it a second thought. We just turned up and thought, I'll be all right. And then she was diagnosed with microcephaly before she was born. So her head growth was in the whatever percentile is the worst one, or the smallest one, sorry, not worst. And so we knew something was amiss, and she was born and she was very small and her head was very small. But we were in a sort of so we knew something was awry very early on, but obviously you get told by everyone that it'll be fine, and the reason that she's not breastfeeding is just because every child can breastfeed, and it's something wrong with the way Sarah was doing it, and we're like, no, this
Oh
is
my God, we're so similar. I mean,
different.
we had, oh, boys will catch up. He's slow, he's a boy, he'll catch
Yeah.
up. It's like, Will wasn't slow and didn't need to catch up. And it's a bit of a shut door sometimes, it feels like, doesn't
It
it?
is. There's the say, the milestones. You just miss milestone after milestone. It's all, children develop at different rates, and it's like, can someone just take on board that? Because if Joey was fine, then there was something wrong with what we were doing, basically, and that level of guilt feeds into it. And she was sort of the medical establishment sort of agreed with us after a while, and they started genetic testing. Um, but they didn't find anything. They tested for Rubinstein and things, but it wasn't that. And so that sort of the genetic bit went away. The NHS sort of ran out of money or interest. But then she gradually missed more and more milestones, and then it becomes obviously as she gets older, it becomes blindingly obvious that you know, when it was time to put her in nursery, nursery couldn't cope with her. When it comes to putting her into school, you know, these sort of things sort of force people to realize that something's changed. And obviously she couldn't, she's only got 2 words now. She's 19, she's got 2 words, but you know, when she can't speak and she's sort of 3 and 4 and 5, and physically Joey doesn't have a huge, she has a very pronounced sort of facial type for Dirk Monet, which is what we discovered that she has, but she doesn't sort of present. If you saw her in the street, it wasn't until you tried to talk to her that you would realize that
Yeah.
she was slightly different. So we didn't have those sort of markers, but the intellectual development and the as she got older, the autism and the non-verbal and all the other things became pronounced. So yeah, everybody was on board by a certain point, and then we were invited to join 100,000 genomes, and we did it, and we forgot about it. And then 3 years later, we got somebody said, "Do you want to come for a genetics chat?" And we thought, well, yeah, they'll just tell us they haven't found anything. So it's so similar to what you write in your,
Yeah, so we had, I
so
mean,
similar.
I mean, I'm going to bore people with the same thing, but we had the same thing. You know, Charlie was, he didn't, immediately he didn't breastfeed. And that was a real struggle. And so, you know, Sarah beat herself up a lot about that. I talk about all these things in the, like with the benefit of nearly 13 years worth of hindsight that, you know, but a lot of the time we didn't really discuss it because we just, I think between us, we didn't really want to admit that we might be at fault for what had gone wrong. And how do you also, you know, also frankly, as a father, how do you possibly have a conversation with your wife about breastfeeding and things like that? Because it's like, you know, I don't know what I'm talking about, frankly. And then so you kind of have this guilt layer that builds up and builds up, and then it was my mum actually who used to be a midwife who said to us at about 1 year old, look, I think you really do need to start. You know, we'd had health visitors saying, there's nothing to worry about. It'll catch up. But he wasn't rolling over. He was smaller. He'd had a few little bits of sickness, which were probably just to do with not being very strong and eating properly. And she said, look, you need to, and we couldn't really force the NHS to do anything. So actually, we used Sarah's private medical care to go to Bupa, as it was then, did a whole load of checks and come out of it. And it was like a scene from a TV show, frankly. We're sitting in this office after about a year's worth of tests, and the doctors there with their X-ray of the cross section of his skull,
Mm.
pointing to the black space around the skull, saying, you know, this is, you know, he's like, that's inside my son's head, um, saying, he's got that the worst phrase in the world that I absolutely hate. I've grown to hate it. Global developmental delay, and you
Yeah,
come out and you're like, what does that mean? And it's
yeah,
like one of those exasperating phrases where if you have to kind of sit down and break down each individual word, and so that I understand each individual word and what does that actually mean. And I, you know, and as you go through the same process that you went through, like not being able to go to proper nursery, the fact that Charlie also didn't speak, he looks. I mean, I always describe it as a kind of a bit of looseness in his face and a bit of kind of vacancy in his eyes. But otherwise, he looks like a normal child. And so it's very hard for people to understand who meet him for the first time. And but he's also non-verbal. He only really says, yeah, really is his only real word he says even today. And you're kind of left with this exasperating position. And so, you know, the NHS again did everything they could do, but not a lot. And again, we did the 100,000 Genome Project, which we were invited to do. And like you, we got the letter saying, I'm sorry, nothing, you know, they said, oh, we're closing the project. Actually, we got a letter saying they're closing the project. Nothing, we forgot about it. And then I was just looking it up in my diary. It's a year tomorrow when everything changed. On the 20th of June last year, we were sitting at home and the NHS, the Charlie's geneticist at St George's Hospital in Tooting rang completely out of the blue and said, you can have an appointment in an hour. We'd like you to get on a video. You know, the NHS never offers you an appointment in an hour. And then picked up the phone and suddenly on this video call, the geneticist says, there's a new fault with a gene we've discovered. It's called ReNU42. And you're one of the first people in the world Charlie's one of the first people in the world to be diagnosed with it. We think this is going to be massive. there you go. And you get this diagnosis, and you're like, oh my God, the world is suddenly
Yeah.
changed. What did it, I mean, the beautiful thing about There She Goes is the last, I mean, I can tell, for those who haven't seen it, you will be in floods of tears in the final scene. It's so joyful.
Mm.
Um, do you, what, and it kind of, I'm guessing you tried to reflect what the diagnosis had meant to you guys. What did it mean on a kind of, I mean, on a kind of emotional level, but also on a practical level, what's it meant?
It's. I was going to do one little not proviso, little thing I was going to say right at the top of this, which is that Sarah has thought it was great because me and James, obviously both dads, obviously that's why we're here. But she would thought it would be nice for dads to have this chat. I was going to say right at the top, all the stories that I tell about Joey, everything I say, please be aware that it was Sarah who did all the hard work.
You're right. Yep.
So
I vouch for
I'm
that.
I'm about to say something about, oh God, and then she wakes up at 3 in the morning and it's
Yeah.
really difficult. I just want everybody on this to be aware that it's Sarah who's going to be
Yeah.
to deal
No,
with it.
please. I wish I'd said that as well. I'm really
I,
jealous that you
I
said it
don't,
first.
I don't want it to. So also, the reason I'm doing this, not Sarah, is that Sarah has a proper job and she works as a neuropsychologist and she didn't have time. It was me that had acres of time in my hands because I'm a writer and was able to do this. Anyway, I wanted to say that. Diagnosis. It was the global developmental delay are three of the most horrid words in the whole world because for years you're there and you don't know what it means. It doesn't mean anything really. It's a way of saying we don't know. That's what it is. And exactly the same as you, James. Me and Sarah didn't really talk about it or obsess about a diagnosis because we thought it probably won't come. We don't know what the future holds. I'd rather just push. I'd rather not speculate. I'd rather just let's just see what happens. I don't want to think about it, basically. I don't want to think about what she's going to be like when she leaves school or what she's going to be like when she's 13, like Charlie is, or when I just don't want to think about it. I know that maybe I should. I just emotionally I can't do it. And then we got this diagnosis when she was 13. Um, and it's hard to put into words. I wasn't expecting it. The geneticist just said, "We found it," and honestly, I just burst into tears. I just started crying before she told me what it was, and I just didn't think I was going to react that way, but I did. And in practical terms, it doesn't really change very much because there's Joey's always going to be Joey, and that's just who she is, and emotionally there's a whole thing that goes on in your head about, well, I don't want her to be different because then she wouldn't be Joey, and but there's no cure, there are some treatments, as in once you know specific, once you can compare it to other cases, there are some possible speech and language things that might work better with Dirt 1A, that anyway, but that's minor. The main thing though is suddenly all these things you've been noticing over the years, you get the leaflet from Unique and you get the info. I mean, we were 414. She was the 414th person to be diagnosed in the world. So there's a small amount of case study out there. It's not huge, but you're just going down the tick list. You're just, the fussy eating, the seizures. Not that Joey had very many, but that was in there. The small size, learning disability, obviously, autism, obviously. Constipation, that's another thing. She has digestion, but it's just a checklist of, and it's like it suddenly validates all those conversations you've had over the years where people are saying, well, have you tried it with other foods, have you done this? And it's like trying to convince people maybe our parenting is terrible, but there's something else going on here, and suddenly you've got a leaflet that says, no, the reason your kid didn't breastfeed was because she had Dirk-One syndrome. So that in a way was one thing, but the main thing is this, basically. This getting in touch with other families with children who have the same specific chromosomal condition, um, is an absolute. Unique is a brilliant charity, but then within Unique, obviously, there are subsets. So we're a member of the Dirt-One group within Unique, and both sets of the sort of Facebook things and the organizations are amazing. But to have the ability to talk to some other parents or brothers or sisters of people who've had I won't say exactly the same, because within every Dirk One-A, whether it's a translocation or a deletion or whatever, they are different, and then everybody's story is different, but the similarities are striking.
Yeah, when I started writing I really wanted to tell everybody. I mean, I found out about Nicky Whiffin, who's the scientist in Oxford whose team had discovered this the gene, and I wanted to go and interview her, which was amazing to meet. And so in the process, of doing what you do as a journalist, to go and write a factual story that's based on your own life, you go and research everything. And I mean, it's amazing speaking to Nikki. I was just in floods of tears when at first. It was really embarrassing. You're supposed to be a professional journalist who's, we do huge investigations, like of very famous people sometimes, and remove from it, and then suddenly you write about yourself, and you find yourself unable to stop crying, and and um, and um, and then I spoke to, so in America, they were slightly ahead of us in the UK in diagnosing the number of people, I reached out to this woman called Jessica who had started this Facebook group in America, and she was telling me about her son Devon, and we had exactly the same conversation that I had with you, Shaun, when we first met, which was basically, and I listened back to the recording, and in fact, actually, you can hear it on the podcast that we did for the Sunday Times, where basically I try to be really, when I'm interviewing people normally, I try to be really respectful and let them tell their stories and not interrupt them till they're finished. But I found myself every time Jessica said something, I was like, oh my God, it's just like Charlie. Just like she was telling me about Devon, just like Charlie. Just like she's 5,000 miles away, and she's had in New York State and has had exactly the same experience as we've had over here. And what I found the whole thing did, very much like you, was with the community stuff. So that was amazing to have this Facebook group. And I remember when Sarah pulled up the Facebook group for the first time, lots of the families had put pictures of their kids on, and they had the same facial expressions, and they had the same characteristics, like they love playing with water. They had the same infection. All the kids with ReNU had this amazing infectious laugh. They all love like stacking cups. They all love game shows. I mean, in America, they're watching it, the kids in America are watching the American equivalent of the English game show that we had, like The Price is Right, over because it's absolutely flabbergasting. And and it really gave me something that I didn't realize that I had missed before, because I remember thinking when we were like filling out all of the millions of council forms we had to first fill out, to get access to special nurseries and do an EHCP and things like that. I became really jealous of I found myself becoming very jealous of people with kids with disabilities that were recognizable. I mean, it sounds insane to say it out loud, but I became very jealous in my of like people who had kids with Down syndrome, because they had this amazing community, they had something that they could pin to, and they were all part of together and share together. And I found that really, really, I was incredibly jealous. But now, since having the diagnosis, I've got we've got that group of people that are going through the same thing. And in fact, last week I had an email. In America, they're a bit ahead of us, and Jessica has set up this amazing charity, a non-profit in America. This week I had an email from somebody who said, would you like to be involved in a charity in this country? We're going to do a charity for ReNU syndrome, as we call it now, and we're going to start something. And it's that sense of community that's so um, amazing. I mean, I just mentioned it there briefly. How have you found dealing with uh like councils and things? I mean, has there been a difference between having a diagnosis and not having a diagnosis in terms of access to care and suddenly being thrown into that world?
I don't think that the diagnosis is, it's nice to be able to say something rather than go down the route of saying she's autistic, but there's, and it's nice to be able to say something, but I wouldn't say that's made a huge difference. I mean, I have to admit that I think we're quite lucky, basically, in that we live in Southwest London, and our dealings, we have had problems over the years. We certainly have had problems, and we've had problems with nurseries, but I don't think I can sit here and say woe is me, because actually Joey's school has been really good. Um, and she's leaving in about 3 weeks' time, and that's going to be there won't be a dry in the house apart from Joey, who probably won't care. But we've been good with that, and we have had a succession of very dedicated social workers that have dealt with us. So I can't really say that I found it terrible. Having said that, obviously the whole process is built to stop us accessing things. We've certainly experienced all of that. But I think that other people, and perhaps you, James, have had more difficulties than that dealing with the care system.
It's not it. I mean, I think we are. I found it challenging not having anything to write on forms. I think we found that I mean, I say I found it difficult. Sarah found it difficult,
Yeah.
because things like in one way, we're lucky that Charlie is um, so disabled that there is he definitely falls into the part of the system where you have to have special needs school and transport to school and things like that. That's not really, but just trying to find where Charlie fits in has been really, really hard. So trying to convince social workers, even things like getting a blue badge.
Oh,
One of the bonkers things I find about the system is that getting something like a blue badge is not really set up for people with learning disabilities. It's like,
no.
your heart doesn't work, your legs don't work, that's fine. Your brain doesn't work, suddenly that becomes uh
I I think I said this to you last time. We haven't got a blue badge. We haven't been able to get one. But I can't get my head around the fact that Joey, if she gets out of the car at Sainsbury's, will just belt across to
yeah.
Sainsbury's because she wants to get into Sainsbury's and look at all the whatever she wants to look at. Because she's got no road safety whatsoever. If that wasn't a big enough reason to allow her to park nearer to Sainsbury's, then I don't know what is. But it's just the system is not built to recognise. I've got a whole thing. I think I said before about our children in particular. I think people just don't quite understand
Yeah.
who they are. I think that's part of why I wrote There She Goes. I can't speak for you, but I imagine that was some thinking behind the brilliant piece you wrote in the Sunday Times. It's that I think people just don't understand quite what it is that we have to deal with. I'm not saying they're not sympathetic. I think most people are very sympathetic. It's just I don't think they can get their heads around the complexities of learning disability and autism and whatever comes with it. I just think it's like so I think I said this to you last time. The whole explosion of autism diagnoses, for example, is something that we have to welcome because I have friends who've been diagnosed late in life with autism and it's been great for them and it's helped them understand who they are. That's fine. But we have to take into account the world seems to have a view of what autism is, for example, that bears no relation whatsoever to Joey's experiences.
Mm.
It's seismically different. And I think my Sarah's got she is very vehement about this that people don't understand what severe or profound means. I think they think it means that you have moderate autism, say, or mild autism, and it's a sort of more severe form of that, which I suppose in a sort of technical sense it is that end of the spectrum. But I just think people can't quite get their heads around what it actually means to,
Yeah, I think one of the things I loved about There She Goes is that it must have been quite hard for you to, I mean, it's so physical. It's so not the script. The words are brilliant, but obviously half of your job is also trying to make sure that the physicality of the roles are described. And one of the hard things about learning disabilities is trying to capture that physicality, isn't it?
yeah, no, completely. I mean, the number of times Joe's beaten me up or beaten her mum up to be more specific, not deliberately, just this, she's a strong girl. She's physically quite fast. Well, no, she walks at a snail's pace, but if she wants to, she can go like a rocket. She's strong-willed, and trying to get her to do even the most basic things, if she isn't cooperate, it's very physically draining. And as she's
Yeah.
older, it's got worse. And and another example, it's just a very minor point I'll make, but we used to get her grandparents are wonderful. They really, once they got on board about who Joey was, then they've been great, but they can't help now. She's just too. Her nana's terrified of her. Terrified
Yeah,
of
it's
her.
difficult, isn't it? I mean, I mean, just think simple things like brushing Charlie's teeth is an absolute nightmare because he's 13 next month. He's a big boy now to be able to. I mean, he's little for his age, but he's still big enough that you can't hold him. Cutting his hair's a nightmare.
Yeah,
We cut his hair every single day because literally it's snip, snip, then you have to leave it, and that's it for the day. And it's like a rolling 365 days a year
but
thing. And I think um, what's really hard, isn't it, is that actually, I mean, I find this with Charlie, is that the day to day can actually be quite boring when he's in his routine, but I mean, I say this, but actually, it's the things you build into your routine that you just become accepting of that actually aren't there for people with other with normal children. Just the fact, but Charlie gets up in the morning, he has his porridge, he puts his school clothes on, we put his school clothes on him, he goes to school on the bus, he comes home, he goes into the living room, he plays with his screens and has some pasta and pesto, he'll have a bath, he'll hang out with the dog for a bit, and then he'll go to bed. And then that is the kind of routine that you build in to make life as stable as possible. And I'm sure everyone's got their own routines, but it's the unpredictableness, isn't it, that people don't really
mm,
get, that you can build that routine in as much as you want, but then suddenly, for no reason whatsoever, something just seems to happen.
yeah, yeah. It's exactly the same, Joe. It's exactly the same. And she did it the other, we have a routine at the weekend. There's a specific walk she has to go on, and these sort of, we have to go to certain shops.
Yeah.
She has to look at certain things and be told she can have them on her birthday, even though, all of this. But it's a routine and it's boring. It's massively boring. And, she's 19 now, and it's not normal to be doing that with your 19-year-old daughter every single. Anyway, it's routine, but also the other day she just kicked off. She just went. I don't know why it was. It was on a bus. She hit a bloke, another passenger who was lovely and sort of understanding, but it could have gone the other way. But we had to get her off the bus. We had to drag her off the bus, and then sort of getting her home and I don't know what it was. It could be anything. It could have been normally a pain related, but maybe she had a headache, but she just went. And so it is that. It's exactly what you say. It's the sort of slightly mind-numbing routine of it all, with the notion that it could go at any minute. It just,
I had to say, when something goes wrong, that's when the non-verbalness makes me very sad. I mean, at the moment, Charlie's refuses to have his teeth brushed on this side here. He's putting his hand on his mouth like this. He won't let you look at what. So there's obviously something wrong, but he can't explain it to you. And it's in those situations like that I really find it the hardest.
yeah,
That you're like, oh God, I wish you could just tell me what is wrong there.
yeah,
But something's wrong, but he can't do it. And that's when, you accept so much over a period of time. But that's when it gets you, when you want to do your best for your child and you can't.
yeah, totally. I mean, Joey, it often is pain, but she can't express where the pain is, and she hasn't got her head around the concept of pain as a thing. It just makes her uncomfortable, and it makes
Yeah.
her kick off. But she can tell you it's a headache. She can point at her head, but aside from that, you don't know if it's earache, sore throat, tummy ache, period pain, whatever it is. Um, yeah, so in the end, we end up probably over medicating her with painkillers just because I can't think of, and they seem to work. If 20 minutes later she's calmed down, you think, oh, that was probably it. But it's exactly what you're saying. It's if you could just have a little bit more language somewhere, then it would make all of our lives a lot easier. Um,
How have you found, do you have people who come in and help you look after her, Joey?
well, transition was very difficult, and we do have some carers that come in now to look after her from the adult services, but that's just a few hours here and there in the week.
Yeah.
She does get respite, so she goes to a really good respite centre once a week. And before that, when she was a child, she got a couple of days a month at a respite centre in Moor Lane. And they're wonderful. I mean, they're obviously wonderful, and she loved going there. but you know, it's been a battle to get them, I have to say. Especially when she was a child, getting the child respite was very difficult. It took a very long time. It was in COVID as well. I mean, it was just all
Oh, yeah.
everything was terrible. But so she does get some help, yeah. So that's why you know, I have to caveat what I say, that you know, we do get help.
I find myself, I mean, very similar to you. I mean, we get a few hours, and you know, the people that we find it really hard actually to find. Well, we again, Sarah finds it really hard to like find the good people, because you've got to find somebody that you know, you can, much to your point about people don't really understand. You can write learning disabled in a job ad for help with some with a carer, but that doesn't mean anything to people unless they come and spend some time with Charlie and see what he's like and understand that he's not toilet trained at 13 years old, and he's not, you know, that he's very, very, very messy, and he's going to be unpredictable, and he might hit you sometimes, but he doesn't mean it out of spite. It's just saying hello or trying to get attention or something. Um, and again, I think like you, I mean, we use a brilliant charity called Challenges for that, where Charlie goes to a holiday scheme on Saturdays, and we get a week a year at a holiday camp for him, which has become with Green Frog, which is amazing. And you just find yourself wanting to say thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you to all of these people that uh get him. And I think that's what's kind of what I really wanted to do was to try and make people, just when I wrote about Charlie, to just get him.
Yeah.
And you get these lovely moments of people that you meet every now and again who just get him. They get you and the situation you're in. And that's when it becomes the most kind of heartwarming, that people take the time to understand.
Yeah, when we last spoke, you said, and I completely agree, that the little moments that really get you is just the kindness of strangers, or maybe not strangers, just the kind of, it's, I was telling you about, I had one, I was at an airport in Newquay. We went to Cornwall on holiday, and we have to fly there because she has to fly when she goes on holiday, irrespective of how far it is. That's just who she is. Anyway, we're at Newquay, and it was sort of around just coming out of COVID time, and I had a nightmare with her getting her through security. It was just, she was kicking off, everything was being kicked over. And I remember it was a member of staff came over, and I thought, here we go. And he just put his hand on my shoulder, and he just went, you're doing all right, you know, you're doing fine. Don't worry about this. This is our problem. It's not your problem. And, you know, I just started crying, obviously. It doesn't take much. But it's moments like that. And I think you related some as well. It's just when people just say,
Yeah.
you're doing a good
We
job.
had it happen in a garden centre very recently, actually. The I don't know how we ended up in a garden centre with Charlie, completely impromptu, but he wanted to he saw the canteen and he decided he wanted to have something to eat. So Sarah and I decided that I would go and look at the barbecues, and she would go, she would sit with Charlie, and he just completely kicked off in the canteen and didn't want what Sarah had bought for him, which was a sausage roll, which he normally loves. And I came back to find him prone on the floor in the garden centre, what, you know, screaming his head off. And Sarah just said to me, look, it's all right if you come along. You know, she saw me and she's like, waved me away and said, it's going to be okay. I'll deal with it. And then I came back when it was a bit calmer, about 10 minutes later. And she said, oh, that woman over there, she just came up to me after Charlie was sitting down and said, you look like you need a cup of tea. I'm going to buy you a cup of tea. And it's just one of those lovely moments of, and Sarah and I say that all the time, like, they get it. We just say, you know, that person gets it. That's, you know, and I've been trying to do a bit of that myself. I don't have the courage though to do it. I find I'm so cowardly. I'd love to be one of those people that could just go up to other, but I'm really trying my hardest to do that with other people as well. To, if I see somebody in that situation, to just try and be really gentle about it and just say, you're doing a great job. And then just leave it there.
Yeah, I'm the same. I'm just sort of English and middle class, and
Yeah.
but I try and, well, you know, if I can say, do you need any help or whatever, but no, I must
I'm trying
remember.
to pass it on. I'm trying to
I
pass
pass it on. I remember when people
it
say it to me, it's like, you know, just into tears because it's so nice. But so I must pass that message on.
I can touch the sky.